Well, hi, everybody, and welcome again to 100 Yards of Football, another episode. And this is week 18 of our NFL preview. 18 weeks. Who would have thought that the season would be going by as quickly as it did? Our producer and engineer is Logan Landers. Thank you, Logan, for all that you do. And founder and the co host here is Vincent Turner. And Vincent, thank you for being back with us. 18 weeks have taken place. There's still one more regular season game before we get into the playoffs. And week 18 has implications for a number of different clubs. We want to get into that right away. But first, welcome back.
Hey, it's always a pleasure to be back, excited. When you talk about the National Football League and you played in the league 11 years, you can play all through the regular season, but it's a special time when that money gets started and it's playoff time. The TV ratings are going to go up. And the biggest game of all the sports, the Super Bowl, cannot wait. It's exciting. And me being a Dallas Cowboys fan, Cowboy Nation is always next year. To you, Mr. Harper LaBelle.
Well, I'll tell you, they looked fantastic against Tampa 2 weeks ago in that home game that they win. And then they go up to Philadelphia, and the Eagles are just better. That's all it was. They brought out those old Kelly Green jerseys. I've got one in my weight room. Well, actually, I've got a white one, but the old helmet and everything. Even a bunch of folks in the fans. And Philadelphia, for obvious reasons, is a dominant team in the NFC. And we're going to talk about the NFC and the domination there. But before we do, Vincent, there's still some games that take place this weekend that have not been finalized. We do know that Kansas City will be the number one seed. There's nothing that they can do to change that. The way that it works out right now, Buffalo is number 2, Baltimore is 3. Those won't change, but some real close games and some tight fittings there between Pittsburgh and the Chargers. Who would have thought the Chargers would be where they are? Let's just take a real quick look at the AFC before we continue. The Texans are going to win their division. The Broncos are still in it, and so is Miami, ahead of Cincinnati in terms of tiebreakers. But both the Bengals and the Dolphins need something to happen. They need Denver to lose for one. But very interesting how you've got really 10 teams in the AFC that all have a playoff portion of the picture that here with 1 week left to go, and it hasn't been finalized yet.
You're looking at, for some reason, it always happens like this. You have a lot of teams that are still alive. With Miami and Cincinnati, both of them, well, of course, Cincinnati's playing good football, being the 8-8 team, man. And then with Miami, you're thinking that they're going to get out of their way and start playing good football, but they're still in it. And overall, like I said earlier and a few seconds ago, this is the time of the year where it gets exciting. And then you got the college football playoffs going on. If you're not a serious football fan and you're not a guy that's going to sit in front of the TV and watch football, I don't know what's wrong with you. This is the best of the best.
Yeah. There are some non-athletic people that are out there that hate this time of the year just because there's so much going on with the pigskin. But in terms of the AFC race, we're going to look at one of the games. So the first one will be Cincinnati against Pittsburgh. For obvious reasons, this one has playoff implications. The Steelers just a couple of weeks ago, they were the team to beat, at least in the North. And look where Baltimore's come. They've won 3 in a row. Pittsburgh has lost 3 in a row. The Steelers are still a lock to make the playoffs, but watch out for those Bengals. I've even heard people say that Kansas City wants to lose on purpose, or excuse me, they want to lose on purpose so that Denver gets in their play, just so that they don't have to play the Bengals and Joe Burrow. As hot as he's been over the last few weeks, they've won 4 in a row, and the Bengals are for real.
I heard something on another show that kind of brought up a real good point about Joe Burrow. Second year he makes it to the Super Bowl. It's no question about it. If you had to give MVP votes, I would have to put him up there to the list. He has played outstanding football over the last 4 weeks during their 4-game winning streak. And last week, got to see him play Denver in that football game. Guy had 412 yards, 3 touchdowns. I just hope he doesn't get caught in Cincinnati like Dan Marino did in Miami. You only go to the Super Bowl in your second year, you never get back because he's a special player. Now to the Pittsburgh Steelers. You're on a 3-game losing streak. Now people are saying they want they want Justin Fields back on the center. The Russell Wilson experiment is going another way. One thing that I learned about Pittsburgh this year is that when they play good teams, the Eagles, the Ravens, and the Chiefs, they kind of outmatch. But for me, the key player for them, and especially from my offensive standpoint, is George Pickens. When he's in the game, when he doesn't have a lot going on, Pittsburgh is a good football team offensively. And it seems like Russell Wilson plays very well. But when he's hurt, or he's not on the field, Pittsburgh struggles. And right now, I'm going to say this. Pittsburgh is not playing good football. Back to you, Harp.
Yeah, they're struggling a little bit. They lose to the Chiefs 29-10. And a lot of things are going on there in ho-hum. Kansas City at 15-1. Have you ever – we should be talking about how great they are. But there are some folks, they still haven't peaked yet. I don't know. But one of the things that really interested me is just even a couple of weeks ago when you've got this foursome of teams where you've got Kansas City, Pittsburgh, the Ravens in Baltimore, and Texans, and they played a Thursday night game, then they played a Wednesday game. They kind of swapped the schedule around, and then they're still playing early football. I just think it was torturous, especially if you've got a few injuries in terms of that. But Cincinnati has a chance. A lot has to happen. Miami has to lose, and Denver has to lose, and they have to win for them to get in. But so you're saying there's a chance, and there is. It's slim but none. But let's not forget Pittsburgh needs to get a win here as well to get themselves right with where they need to be. But that'll be an interesting kickoff there. It's one of those, well, at least for me, one of those games that means a lot. But when you're going into the playoffs, you got to get yourself ready. And an 8 o'clock kick, it'll be on ESPN, ABC. Hold on, we're having some techno. Are you back? All right, we had a loss there for a second.
Yeah.
All right, game number place. In terms of the standings with them, let's look at New Orleans and Tampa. Tampa, if they win this ball game against a 5-win team in New Orleans, they're in. Doesn't matter what, they control their own destiny. With a great win, they block a kick. They score, 40 points. They had a great week last week. Just one more time, they got to get it together, and then Tampa's in the playoffs again.
I'm going to say this. Tampa Bay is going to make the playoffs. Bomasuna, what did he have last week against Carolina? 5 touchdowns, 359 yards. Mike Evans is back healthy. Last time they played the Saints, they put 51 points on them. I will really, and I'm going to watch what I say, but I'll really be shocked if they lose this football game to the New Orleans Saints. And I know the Atlanta people don't want to hear this, but you might need to start packing your bags and kind of booking your vacation plans for the Falcon players, because there's no way Tampa Bay is going to lose this football game. No way Baker Mayfield. I said this, I'm going to say it again. If I had some MVP votes for this season, he'll be at the top of my list. I know Josh Allen has played well. I know Lamar Jackson has played well. But you're talking about a guy that's carried his football team without a lot of pieces around him. A rookie running back in Bucky Irving. Remember, Mike Evanson missed some games. Chris Godwin has got hurt. He's done it with Sterling Shepard, his teammate at Oklahoma, and Jalen McMillan, a guy that played at the University of Washington last year. As for the New Orleans Saints, I'm going to tell you there's a scout out there that had Spencer Rattler as his QB1 in the 2024 NFL draft. Keep saying what you're saying, because last week the Saints scored only 10 points. Keep saying that, and this week you might see what the real Spencer Rattler might do. Well, Tampa got everything to gain. Spencer Rattler might not have a good game. Back to you, Harper.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. You mentioned some of the Boomer Sooner numbers. They're third in the league in terms of passing. They're fourth in terms of rushing. They're fourth in terms of overall points scored. Their biggest issue, which used to be their strength, is their defense. They give up 22.9 points a game, and they're 17th in the league. But last week they scored 48 points. They lost to Dallas by 2. But before that, they scored 40 points against the Chargers. They had 30 against the Giants just a couple weeks previous to that. I think they're hitting on all cylinders, and that's a good place to be if you're, one, a coach there in Tampa, or two, if you're Baker Mayfield and his offensive line. They're really clicking on all cylinders, and things look pretty positive. The way that it should have been, if you're a Falcons fan, is you go up to the Commanders there in Washington. You take care of business with the 17-7 lead at halftime, and you just blow them out in the second half. And now you control your own destiny. Instead, an amazing second half from the Commander standpoint, a crowd that's just absolutely thrilled to be a part of it. They get the win, the Commanders do, in overtime. They didn't even give the Falcons a chance to touch the ball, and they end up being in the playoffs because of it. Now, the Falcons have a lot they need to take care of, but they've got to get a win against Carolina at home. Talk a little bit about this game and the importance of Atlanta finishing the season on a positive note. They're 8-8 right now. Do they have what it takes to go 9-7, and will that be enough?
You brought up a good point, Harper. Finishing on a positive note. Beat Carolina, you go 9-8. And that's positive because now we know Michael Penix is probably the guy for the future. You got a good young offensive football team. It seemed like when he got under center, all the other offensive pieces got energy to their game. Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier. Only thing I've seen with the Falcons going forward, help Michael Penix and get some more good offensive alignment. And then you might have a team that maybe you can legitimately start seeing Super Bowl. What bothers me the most about this is that the Falcons waited too long, too late. And sometimes that happens. And you wait too late doing that 4-game losing streak, that's what happens. You don't make the playoffs. Because last week against Washington, that was a playoff game. That was a really enjoyable football game. And as I said before on several of our videos, this is no hard feelings to Kirk Cousins. I think they could have really been successful, but Kirk Cousins, to me, has never been healthy throughout the year. Coming off a torn Achilles, that quick, I don't think he's just been healthy. He's had some good games, and I think over the course of the season, that's what happens. Far as Carolina, your owner, I don't know the direction he wants to go, but Bryce Young has improved as a player. I was worried about him. I didn't know whether or not he was going to really make it, but if everybody wants to take a look at a young player that took a step back, he still was cheering the team on, still becoming a positive influence in the locker room. Take the motto of Bryce Young, and you can be very successful in the National Football League, in my opinion. Back to you, Harper.
Yeah, one of the things you mentioned there, Carolina, you're getting Bryce Young play better, but Chuba Hubbard has really made an impression on me in terms of my son Brian brought this up. He goes, young running backs that are just dominating. The NFC South has plenty of them. Yes, the Falcons with Bijan Robinson, but you mentioned Bucky Irvin just a few moments ago, Chuba, and then you look at Kamara. He's a little bit longer in the tooth. I would freely admit that, but you've got 3 of the 4 teams in the division, and really Alvin Kamara's having a heck of a year this year. So in terms of rushing the ball, it looks like the NFC South has a bright future in front of it, unless free agency depends how that changes everything. But for right now, that's what I'm worried about if I'm a Falcons fan. You've got to win the game, period, and things have to happen, but you can't even make this close. You had your opportunity in front of you. You had to beat a playoff team, couldn't do it. So now you're dependent on a lot of different things. But Carolina, I don't believe they'll roll over. They were just dominated when they went into Tampa. I don't think they'll feel that way. And who knows if they can't pull out an upset win. The draft and the order right now, Carolina is picking – well, they're not in the top 5. So, they're probably 6th or 7th. I've got the top 5 right now. New England is picking first. Cleveland is second. Tennessee, Then the New York Giants, with their loss last week, end up going from the number 1 pick to being moving down to 4th, depending on how they finish the season. And then Jacksonville, with 4 wins and 12 losses, they pick 5th right now the way that it is. So very interesting perspective from that view of looking at, the worst teams. But anyway, so at 1 o'clock, both Carolina at Atlanta and then New Orleans at Tampa. Both of those games are at 1. A 4 o'clock game, let's look at Kansas City against Denver. Kansas City, obviously, they're the number 1 seed in all of football. They're 15-1 right now. Do you play your starters? I know that's the first question that the press looks at. I really think you do. But you know what? If you've got some guys that are dinged up, and if you lose this game to Denver and they end up making it in the playoffs, that means you might play them a 3rd time here in the season. But give me your thoughts first and foremost about the game itself. It's obviously a critically important game. Denver has to win it.
Of course, you got Denver. They need this. They need this game to get in the playoffs. I'm gonna say this: impressive player, Bo Nix. Didn't see it coming. Obviously, the marriage between him and Sean Payton has worked out. Last week, I got proud of the young man by way of War Eagle, by way of Quack Quack Oregon Ducks. 129 left, and he led that team on a game-time touchdown to send the game in overtime. Very impressive with Bo Nix this year. She'll get some Rookie of the votes. She'll get some votes for Rookie of the Year this year. Kansas City, you brought up a good point, and I thought about this over and over. You got home field clinched. To me personally, Harper, I don't mean to disagree with you because you played in the league. I think I would sit my players because when you look at it, I was looking at their receiving group last night going into the playoffs. Xavier Ward, of course, is a young guy, hasn't been hurt. But Hollywood Brown came back last week. He's been nicked up a little bit. Juju Sleester's had some injuries. DeAndre Hopkins is an older guy. So I think I might would sit them because I got everything wrapped up. Chris Jones, Nick Bolden, Trent McBride, McDuffie. I would send all those guys because the game is meaningless to me in Kansas City because regardless, if you play at Denver the 3rd time, they still got to come to your house. I wouldn't want to sit up and I fool around and I win the game. And we just mentioned earlier that red hot team from up there in Cincinnati, Ohio, where the Isley brothers are from. Got that young man, Mr. Joe Burrow, who's throwing that smoke, as Buck Bellew say, who's spinning it to T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. That's who I don't want to see, to keep it honest about it. So I'm sending my starters. Denver wins the game. We can get Denver because one thing that we've been talking about all year long, and even my father, I'm going to give him some love today, Mr. Chester Turner told me when I was at home, Kansas City has not played a good game, man. And you got to give Andy Reid a lot of credit, too. Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift, all the publicity around that team. And that team has still stayed focused and won 15 games. And they've had injuries. And Patrick Mahomes has not played healthy at times this year. And they 15-1. I think I will send my starters, get them healthy. You got to come to my place because I fool around and we beat Denver and Cincinnati gets in there. Nobody want to see Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Back to you, Hawk.
Well, 2 things. One, if you do sit your guys this week for the whole game, that's what I'm assuming you're thinking, then they also sit next week, and it may be 3 weeks before they get live action. I don't know if you do that. I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know if anybody knows if that's a great idea. So do you play them for a half and risk the injury thing? I still remember Tony Dungy going, no, I'm going to sit my guys in the last week when they were coaching the Colts, and they got beat in the first round. For whatever reason, there's always a different way of looking at it. And if you're wrong, everybody's going to say, well, look what you did. That was the dumbest thing you could have done. So that's one thing. But 2, excuse me, 2, the second thing is, we've talked a lot about some of the teams that have changed their culture, whether it be a coach or a couple of draft picks, Washington being one of them. They picked 2nd in the draft last year. They're in the playoffs. The Chargers picked 5th, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And then Denver is another one of those teams that we were talking about how bad they are, and now they're 1 win away from making the playoffs. Or if you have a Miami and a Cincinnati loss on Sunday, they make it. They're in at 9-7. So it's so interesting how quickly you can turn it around. And Denver's really done it with defense. They don't lose it, Bo Nix. Don't lose the game. Just keep, we'll take a punt rather than a turnover. And I'm pretty impressed with the way that Denver has turned things around this year. Aren't you? I mean, who would have thought that Denver be where they are right now? I'm certainly impressed with them.
I cannot say nothing about Sean Payton and Bo Nix. I thought Bo Nix really, just watching his career, we saw him play a lot at Auburn. Let's be honest. Things didn't really work out too well. He had a lot of pressure at Auburn. Daddy was a former quarterback there in Patrick. And to me, he never really played well. He gets out on the West Coast, and he had some good years at Oregon. He went to the Heisman Trophy ceremony his senior year. Yeah. But I was still iffy about him. Could he translate over to the pro game? Because Bo Nix has one of them games it's iffy. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of, to me, it was never smooth on the college level, even though he threw for a lot of yards at Oregon. And then you're looking, he going under Sean Payton. And Sean Payton is demanding. He had Drew Brees. He didn't like what Russell Wilson was doing. And Sean Payton was going to push him. And they even had a blow up during the regular season. But look how it's worked out. Last week, I came away very impressive with the young man. I'm going to say it one more time. They got the ball with 129 up there in Cincinnati. He led that team on a game-time touchdown. That's saying something. That's a lot of veterans in the league can't do that at this moment. So War Eagle, I still consider him War Eagle. Not quite. Back to you, Hawk.
Well, here's how the AFC looks one more time. It's 15-1 with Kansas City. They are the number 1 seed, and they will not be unseeded. Even if they lose, Buffalo at 13-3 can't catch them. They could be 14-4. Buffalo could be who they have the Patriots to finish the season. We still don't know because if Baltimore loses and Pittsburgh wins, there could be an upsetting there in the North. But 11-5 is where Baltimore is, and 10-6 is Pittsburgh. And right there with those guys, they are playoff eligible. They are in right now. Is the LA Chargers at 10-6. Houston will win the South at 9-7. There's no way that Indianapolis, who lost last week, can catch them. Denver at 9-7. Miami at 8-8, and Cincinnati at 8-8 are still in that one final spot, fighting for that 6th position. So we'll see how that turns out. And right now it looks like Denver, if they win, they're in. If they lose, but Miami and Cincinnati both lose, then they're still in. But if Miami wins and Denver loses, then Miami will supplant them, and they will be in. Miami has to lose for Cincinnati to make it, as well as Denver. In the NFC, little different picture. Who would have thought that 2 14-2 teams in the same division would be playing for the division championship? This one will be in Detroit. But your thoughts here on Minnesota at 14-2, coming off another great win last week. They've won 9 in a row, and they're going to be taking on the Lions. Both are 14-2, and this one is for the NFC North.
As I said before, a guy that's from Southern California, the same area you from, Kevin O'Connell. If there's no better coach in the National Football League and should get Coach of the Year, I think it's hands down. It's not even close. I love him. I don't like him. I love him. Just think about what he's done in Minnesota. Came out of that LA Rams kind of culture under Sean McVay. And, man, he took Sam Darnold. Well, Sam Darnold, San Francisco didn't want me. Carolina didn't want me. The Jets didn't want me.
Yep.
And Sam Darnold really has had an MVP season. And it's took their young talent to another level. Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson seem like they are really enjoying time with Sam Darnold. And then Aaron Jones, Green Bay, you made a huge mistake.
Mm-hmm.
You made a huge mistake, baby. And then I want to give shouts out. I know this young man. I know some of his people, Mr. Jundon Greenyard from Heron, Georgia. 12 miles from where I stayed in Douglasville. He was the regional 5A player of the year, went to Louisville / University of Florida, got drafted by the Texans. 11 sacks for the Vikings this year. Brian Flores, the defensive coordinator that's now being rumored for jobs. That's a real good organization over there in Minnesota. And that's a team, regardless what happens on Sunday, Super Bowl quality. Back to you, Hart.
Yeah, very interesting points right there. I think defensively, they're doing it with speed, especially those outside linebackers. They're blitzing. They got 3 of them that have multiple sacks every time that you play against them. You got to figure out where they are. It's not one guy. They're winning with numbers. And I agree in terms of Coach of the Year, with the exception of being a Detroit fan. And what about Dan Campbell is what I would be saying to you. We've done it. And by the way, we got 14, 15, 16 guys that are on IR right now, can't even play. We lose our top sacker in Aiden Hutchinson in week 5. He's still our top sacker, but guess what? We're 14-2, and our offense is just as good as anybody's in the league right now. Do I have an argument? I know you just made your point, and I'm not saying this to disrespect you. I'm just saying, does Dan Campbell get a vote, or will he get any votes in terms of Coach of the Year with his 14-2, especially if they win? If they go 15-2 and they win the division, would you possibly change your mind?
No question about it. I don't have no problem with Dan Campbell. Of course, if they win this game, I would take my votes off Mr. O'Connell and give it to Mr. Campbell. How ironic. A couple of years ago when he had his first press conference, the words he said, "I'm going to bite your kneecaps off." How ironic everybody was calling him an idiot. How ironic everybody was laughing at him. And I remember something he said, and it was on Hard Knocks that season. And I remember he was talking to the team, Harp, and he said, "Gentlemen," he wasn't cursing, he wasn't upset. He said, "Look here, man, if you listen to me, I've been there. We can do something special here in the Motor City. Motown, Smokey Robinson, the Four Tops, L&M. We can do something special in this city." And look at it now. I would never thought the Detroit Lions would be 14-2. And we're talking about their organization being Super Bowl quality. Can you imagine if they make it to the Super Bowl in New Orleans, how many people will be coming down from Michigan? And the thing I like about what Mr. Campbell's done, he's had a good relationship. Let me give kudos to Brad Holmes, the GM. They came over for the Rams. Was Scott over there, the one that discovered Aaron Donald, Todd Gurley, and Cooper Kupp. And look how the Lions have built their team. And we always talk about this, Hawk. Look at the draft. Let me give you some names. Jamar Gibbs, Amon St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Jack Campbell, Brian Branch, Kelly Joseph, Teron Arnold, Mr. Sue, the offensive tackle. All of them were drafted. And their best player, Aiden Hutchinson, said he might be back for the Super Bowl. He's hurt right now. Patience, being able to work together. To me, C-Hop, you can really tell me a little more because you've been a player. To me, the head coach and the GM got to be on the same page. The head coach got to have some input in drafting players, and the GM has got to work with him and getting the right players. That's what I'm most impressed most about Detroit, how they have built their team. And let me throw in Jameson Williams, Roll Tide. And look what they've done. They've built a real serious organization where they can be good for some years. And they got the quarterback from Northern California. Shouts out to you. As you said, you arrogant and you got an attitude, Mr. Stephen Travers. Your man, Jared Goff, he came to Detroit with a serious attitude. Remember in the interview, he felt slighted what they did to him in LA. And when you get a player like that, especially at that position, you get a head coach that's going to believe in his philosophy, and you be able to draft well, that's what happens with organizations. They become pretty good in 2 or 3 years. Back to you, Hawk.
Yeah, Jared Goff, after the Monday Night Football game last night, was saying that it felt like a home game. There were so many folks from Detroit that were there representing. Think about how long it's been since the 1950s that Detroit had an NFL champion. So there's a whole generation of people that are just waiting to spend their money to go down to New Orleans, right, and go have themselves a great time. It hasn't happened. Was it 275,000 people that showed up for the draft show last year when they had that? It was in Detroit. It was amazing.
It was over 775,000.
It's unbelievable how many folks were around for that. So they are starved for professional football in a way that is so exciting for that city and for the whole state, really, and for Lions Nation, which has been so tamed over the years. For them to have a guy like Dan Campbell, and let's be candid, you mentioned the general manager and the relationship and all that kind of stuff. There's a couple of guys on their roster right now that were making Slurpees at 7-Eleven. They were fixing tires at the local mechanic shop. They got guys on their roster that were delivering packages at UPS, and now they're playing in NFL games, in meaningful games, because of all the injury problems that they've had. So it's not unusual to have those type of issues, but it is unusual for you to still be 14-2 after all of that happening. Most people will be going, man, I'm hoping I can keep my job. And they're going, man, I just hope we can keep going another week because we might get one of our guys back that we've been dependent on. Great roster. Everybody contributes in their own special way. And they are so on fire and hungry. And you can just tell that they feed off the crowd in a way that is so uniquely fun to watch. So enjoy it while it takes place. But Detroit, it's your turn right now. You win this ball game, you win the division, you get another beat. Well, you obviously get the bye week, but you earn it, and another chance to heal up a little bit and get ready for the Eagles, the Commanders, the Packers, and the Rams, who are now all in the playoffs. Basically, the only team that we're waiting on is to see who's going to win the South. If Tampa gets a win, they're 9-7 right now. They'd be 10-7. They are in, period, no matter what happens. If they lose and the Falcons end up winning, no tie, but if they win, then the Falcons would end up going because they win that tiebreaker. A tie would mean that Tampa would continue to go. So very interesting how it all takes place. Final thoughts on this 18th and final week of the National Football League.
It's the final week. Week 18, teams are going to know their faith, and then we're going to have a tournament that start. And you look at the Detroit, and you look at Minnesota, and I'm especially looking at Dan Campbell in Detroit. And I thought about this last night. One of the greatest singers ever. He was my man, Mr. Freddie Mercury. Buddy, you are a boy, making a big noise, playing in the streets. You're going to be a big man someday. You got mud on your face. You're a big disgrace. Kicking your can all over the place. Mr. Dan Campbell in the Motor City. We will rock you. Back to you, Harp.
Well, if you're in New York right now, if you're in Carolina, you're Chicago, New England, Tennessee, even Cleveland, you're pretty much ready to put a bow on it. Your season's over. But for a lot of other teams, especially for some new additions to the playoffs from what it looked like last year and the year before, I mentioned Washington. You look at Minnesota getting back in the way that they are. We talked a little bit earlier about Miami, Denver, the Los Angeles Chargers. Both teams in LA will make the playoffs. That's pretty interesting how that's going to work out. But it's a lot of fun, folks. Please enjoy it. A lot of college action. Obviously, the NFL kicking into full swing on Saturday and Sunday, and the playoffs take place soon after. So that is a Week 18 preview look from Vincent Turner and myself. I'm Harper LaBelle. Our producer is Logan Landers. I want to thank him for making sure that we sound and do as good as we possibly can. But thank you for tuning in to another episode. We appreciate it. Have a wonderful and fantastic new year and a great day. Thank you, everybody, for being a part of the show.